Welcome to Corporate Warrior, the podcast that brings you the best advice on how to improve your health, optimize performance, and maximize productivity. With your host, Lawrence Neal.
This podcast is brought to you by hituni.com. That's hituni.com. HitUni is an e-learning course provider specializing in high-intensity training for personal trainers and for people looking to learn how to apply the principles of HIT to their own training for best results. It comes highly recommended by Body by Science author Dr. Doug McGuff, Discover Strength CEO Luke Carlson, MedX Precision Fitness owner Blair Wilson, HIT expert Drew Bay, and the founder of Living La Vida Low Carb, Jimmy Moore. It was founded by author and high-intensity training master personal trainer Simon Shawcross. Simon has 15 years experience and has supervised over 15,000 workouts. Due to a combination of demand and a lack of quality in certification programs in the fields of high-intensity training, Simon and his team spent the last 3 years developing top-quality courses that will educate fitness professionals and participants to enable them to train individuals and themselves in the safest manner and produce best results. HitUni has been put together using knowledge from the very best minds in the field of exercise, including Skylar Tanner, James Steele, Dr. Doug McGuff, Drew Bay, John Little, Mike Mensa, Arthur Jones, Dr. Ellington Darden, and many more. The courses are delivered online through the website, where you can learn via a variety of multimedia materials at your own pace and convenience. The online video presentations are engaging and make learning fun. Online support and a discussion forum are provided to resolve any sticking points and enable you to share ideas and ask for help. Depending on whether you want to become a personal trainer, are already a personal trainer who wants to upskill, or if you're a keen HIT participant that is eager to learn more about how you can apply HIT to your own workouts for maximum benefit, there are several great value courses to choose from. I am personally partway through the PT course and I'm really enjoying it. I primarily wanted to do the course to learn more about how to apply HIT to my own training for better results. The courses are really easy to follow and each section is organized into bite-sized chunks that give you a real sense of achievement after you complete each one. To get your exclusive Corporate Warrior 10% discount on any course you purchase, simply head on over to hituni.com, that's hituni.com, and enter the coupon code CW10, that's CW and the number 10. So again, head on over to hituni.com, hituni.com, pick your course and enter the coupon code CW10. Thanks very much for your support. Hi guys, this is Lawrence Neal and welcome to another episode of Corporate Warrior, where it is my job to interview world-class experts on productivity in terms of exercise, lifestyle and business to identify the workouts, the routines, the philosophies, books, resources, etc., that you can use to significantly improve your effectiveness and efficiency in your everyday life. Guests include exercise scientists, New York Times best-selling authors, elite adventure racers, serial entrepreneurs, and many more. Today's guest is Luke Carlson, who joins me for a second time on the podcast. Luke is founder and CEO of Discover Strength. He's also a well-known speaker on the subjects of resistance exercise and business, a co-author of 2 books, and holds a master's in kinesiology. I actually got it right that time, as well as many other fancy qualifications. And I'm not even doing Luke's resume justice there because he's a prolific guy who's had a lot of success. And you can read more about that in the blog post. Luke is holding a resistance exercise conference this year on April the 1st and 2nd in Minneapolis. The topic being the science and application of strength training for health and human performance. Now, Luke talks about this on the podcast. It sounds amazing. It features exercise experts like Dr. James Fisher and James Steele, and also some experts in resistance exercise in relation to basketball and American football. So basically it sounds amazing and I wish I was going, but I live many miles away and do not have the ability to attend, unfortunately. But you'll hear more about that in the podcast, and I do encourage you to check it out and attend if you can, because you'll get a lot of value from it. In this interview, we get into questions on exercise selection and we talk about some of the discoveries in exercise that Luke has made over the past year or so. And we talk about business motivation, and then we end up in the bonus question realm where I ask him questions like, what have you changed your mind about in the last year? What are your morning routines, etc. This was quite short and sweet. It's an hour, which is pretty short for me, as you probably know if you listen to this podcast regularly. Luke is a man who is in demand, so we had to keep it pretty succinct. But with the time we had, I think we did really well. And this one is packed with some awesome advice on exercise and business. For all the show notes and links, they'll be in the usual place on corpwarrior.com. CORP warrior as in a Spartan warrior, so WARRIOR.com. And that will redirect you to the homepage, which is 15minutecorporatewarrior.com, where you can find all of the show notes, bit of background on Luke, a link to the first podcast we did together, and then also all of the resources and links to purchase those and check those out as well. So without further ado, please enjoy this interview with Luke Carlson. Cool. Okay, so question number one. When we last spoke, you gave me a lot of detail in terms of like the different exercise protocols that you advocate and teach within Discover Strength. What has changed, if anything, in terms of how you train your clients since our last conversation? So over the last year or so, has anything changed fundamentally in the way you exercise your clients or anything there?
Yeah, so I think we've refined how we think about the training session itself. So maybe the exercise methodology, the actual technical aspects of the exercise haven't changed, but we have so many trainers, and we wanted to create a bit of a mental filter for how we understand and how we put together all the information that we acquire and all of our learning and how we can bring it to the session. So let me give you an example. One of those things is we wanted to distill it all down into 5 major pillars. And I don't want to go into every pillar right now, but for example, one pillar is what we call excellence at failure. All right. So excellence at failure means when we're in a training session, whether it's one-on-one or a small group, it means we have to, as a trainer, have a plan for how we're going to coach that client at the point of momentary muscle failure. First of all, depending on that client's psychology, how are we going to get them to momentary muscle failure? And depending on that client, how are we going to push them beyond momentary muscle failure? So for us, we just call that excellence at failure. It means we have to have the right plan, the right strategy, the right advanced overload technique or not at the point of failure with our clients. So that's one example of understanding what we think makes a great training session for a client. And one other example of that is what we call a pillar we call read and respond. So we think a great trainer is spending the entire session reading the client, reading the different cues that they're giving off. So we're understanding what they're experiencing in terms of discomfort, in terms of fatigue, in terms of how hard we can push them, in terms of anything they may have going on from an injury standpoint. I just think the mark of a great trainer is someone who can read the client and then respond accordingly. Respond accordingly with teaching and coaching, but also with level of intensity, etc. It's not just this is the right level of intensity, go apply it. It's are you reading the client moment by moment?
Right. Okay. So the approach has become much more prescriptive, you would say, as it's evolved?
I think what we've tried to do, I mean, we've been doing this for a very long time, is we tried to categorize all of the information that we've taken in over many years and understand how we can distill it into a simple prescription or a simple construct so that our trainers can understand how to approach the session. Now, from maybe a physiology standpoint or an exercise science standpoint, how have we changed what we're actually doing in our workouts? We've changed very little. We probably have a greater understanding that training to momentary muscle failure and stopping at muscle failure, according to the literature, is just as valuable as a lot of advanced overload techniques. And we're a group of trainers and we're a company that we are really almost obsessed with advanced overload techniques and doing things beyond concentric muscle failure. And the literature so far, and we're responsible for a decent amount of this literature. We've published a number of these studies along with James Fisher and James Steele. We just haven't found any added benefit to these things that we always thought were so incredibly beneficial. Okay. So what we've understood now is that maybe the advanced overload technique is simply a way to make sure that that client is getting to momentary muscle fatigue or the level of overload, the level of fatigue that we're really trying to see. Because not everyone can just go there on their own. So maybe that's the purpose of some of these advanced overload techniques, where if you asked me a few years ago, I would say that, again, absolutely no matter what, these advanced overload techniques are just responsible for producing better results.
Okay. Luke, just quickly, do you mind just switching off your video to improve the session? Is that possible?
Switch off the video?
Yeah. Is that possible? Or I can call you back.
Yeah, let me just make sure I know how to do that.
This isn't a problem because we can always edit this aspect, but yeah.
Does that work now?
Yeah, it's a long story. I've got Virgin, who are a UK-based telecom. They're upgrading into in the area, and it's a long story, but it's affecting the performance, the bandwidth where I'm at.
Okay, great.
Anyway, yeah, no, great answer. Interesting. How is it that you are able to prevent people from overtraining? You know, when you're doing such advanced overloading techniques, how do you measure that, and how do you prevent them from overtraining and make sure that your clients are progressing?
Yeah, well, so I think the number one way you assess whether or not someone is overtraining is, are they progressing in terms of load, repetitions, and are they making progress in terms of the different outcomes they're looking for? And a key outcome would be a bod-pod analysis. Are they actually improving their lean muscle tissue, and are they decreasing their fat tissue? And so I think if we're measuring all of those things, load, repetitions, and we're taking a look at body composition analysis, then we have a good feel of someone actually recovering from the training sessions. Now, we don't let any of our clients train more than twice per week. We recommend twice per week over once per week. We still have a very large percentage of our clientele that do train once per week. And we have a large percentage of our clients who maybe think they train twice per week, but when it comes down to it, because they're traveling, they're out of town, life gets in the way, maybe in the course of a 52-week year, they're maybe doing 70 to 80 workouts. So maybe they're averaging 1.5 workouts per week. So I think that kind of infrequent approach allows for us to really push them during their sessions, and they're still able to recover from those workouts.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, because personally I have found that, I mean, you know, I believe I mean, obviously you could question the way I'm measuring this or whatever, but I found that for myself I do best on once a week. Have you found that, you know, regardless of personal recovery rates, etc., that twice a week just works better across the board, or are there exceptions to that in your experience?
So I think that it's individual. I think some people are better at twice a week. Some people are better at once a week. Some people are better at once every 5 days. What we've found is that the major thing that impacts recovery is lifestyle. And we're in a world now where so many of our clients are doing so many other things related to exercise. I mean, we have so many clients that are also training for a marathon, clients that are really doing a lot of biking or cycling, clients that really are still really into their yoga and maybe are into Pilates or into some other forms of physical activity and exercise, maybe even forms of physical activity and exercise that we're not big fans of, but we know it's going to impact their overall recovery. And then in addition to that, of course, sleep and rest in general. You know, I think it's pretty rare for us to have clients that are consistently receiving 8 hours of sleep a night, and so that absolutely impacts recovery.
Right. Okay. Cool. I'm assuming that you've collected a large amount of data on the trainees over the years in terms of their workout stats. Is that something that you collect and review?
Yeah, we have 10 years of data right now, just approaching 10 years. Yeah.
Cool. That's really interesting. So, tell me, have you drawn any interesting conclusions from that data? And I'd be very interested in if you've come to any. I guess conclusions is a strong word, but come to any kind of result where you feel that a certain protocol and frequency is best for optimizing lean mass gain, or any other discoveries for that matter.
I think, Lawrence, at this point, I would say that a mental or psychological interest, tenacity, fervor for your training has a massive impact on what sustained results will look like. And so I think the variation of protocol and application of the methodology stimulates the fervor and the interest to continue to train appropriately and train at a high level of intensity with the appropriate frequency. So what I'm saying is I think we have to make sure that it doesn't get boring. And I'm talking about people that are insanely focused. And we have some clients that have been training with us for 10 years, and some of them are like competitive bodybuilders. Some of them are 500-pound bench pressers. I mean, we have some very strong quote-unquote fit clients, and they are incredibly focused. And I still think that by varying the exercise prescription, we continue to create engaged training experiences. And the more engaged that client is in their training, I think the better results that they produce. Now, that's kind of a boring answer for me because I really like to take kind of a scientific approach, and I want to know what protocol produces the best results. I want to know the exact frequency. I want to know the exact volume during the actual exercise. But what I'm starting to maybe realize over time is that we're dealing with human beings, and maybe trumping all the other physiological aspects is psychologically, are they incredibly interested in their training? If we discovered that a certain 6 exercises or 5 exercises or 7 exercises were the best exercises, and that using a particular repetition duration or repetition cadence and rep range was the perfect prescription, I still think someone will get bored doing that after 1 year, or definitely after 3 to 4 years. And I think some people and some of my colleagues would say, well, if it produces the best results, if someone's getting bored, it's just because they're not intelligent. I would still say that you have to create a training experience where they're excited to train and there's some engagement in the actual process. And I'm telling you right now that I've been training with a high-intensity training approach since 1998. So it's 2016 right now, so that's 17, 18 years. And I'm as excited about my next workout as I've ever been. And I think I've never strayed away from this umbrella of evidence-based resistance training or high-intensity training, but I've changed the approach slightly here and there. And I look forward to those slight changes. And I think those slight changes allow me to continue to produce improvements. And I will tell you, I'll summarize all this by saying we see clients who produce tremendous results over a long period of time. So I used to think that maybe someone would maximize their muscle strength and muscle hypertrophy and even their body composition after a year to 2 years of training. And we see clients that are training for 4, 5, 6, 7 years and are still making progress. And to me, that's really encouraging.
When you say progress, do you mean increase in lean mass?
Yes.
And do you put that down to the variation of the program in terms of keeping their interest as a sole contributor to that?
So I would say that it's their engagement in training the right way, their interest and their fervor for training the right way over a long period of time that's actually producing those results. And I would say that the variation in looking forward to their workouts and looking forward to the fact that they know their trainers are always trying to come up with something, I don't want to say always different, because we still stick to a lot of the same basic principles, of course, and same basic exercises, but we're trying to make any possible iterative change that we can to the exercise session, the way we're doing an exercise, the way we're conducting an entire workout. And people look forward to that. Clients look forward to that. If I trained you 3 years ago and I train you now, you're going to notice some differences. We want to get better at our craft all the time. And that doesn't mean that we're just changing things because we're bored. Absolutely not. We want to make iterative changes and keep what works and continue to tweak what we're bringing to the client. And when I say bringing to the client, I just mean bringing to the training experience as a whole. It could even be our own training as trainers ourselves. When we perform the workouts ourselves, we want to continue to progress and make iterative changes.
Cool. And can I assume that, because I personally seen it in myself, and I guess based on what I've learned is that, most of us do increase, most of get as close as our genetic potential as possible within 1 to 2 years. So would those improvements be quite marginal in your experience, by looking at your clients?
Yeah, they're marginal, but they're still meaningful. And if we were to plot them, we wouldn't even see more improvement in the first year to 2 years relative to what we see from year 3 to year 4, which has really been interesting to me, is that we would always expected more rapid increase in lean muscle tissue and strength in the first year. And that we just have not seen that. We've seen, first of all, a non-linear improvement over time. So there's a lot of variation when someone improves. And maybe that improvement at different time periods is due to just more engagement and tenacity and focus in the workout sessions and recovery, etc. But if you were to graph it over time, there's constant progression. There's just time periods where there's greater progression versus other time periods.
That's really interesting.
Which, by the way, all of this to me, that observation is like an encouraging observation. It just means that those of us who are going at this for the long haul, which we really all should be, that there's a lot of progress to make. We can have this attitude that we're training and we're approaching our exercise, and that we want to exercise almost on a crescendo, that we can continue to strive to get stronger and improve body composition and add lean muscle tissue, etc.
Luke, when are you going to open a centre in London? Because I'm too excited, and I want to train at your place, but I'm in London. So,
we would love to be in
London.
I had this summer. I had my first visit to London and to the UK in general.
I saw the pictures.
Yeah, I spent a week with James Fisher, and it was one of the best weeks of my life. And spent time with James Steele, and fell in love with the city of London. So when we think about other markets, my goodness, we would love to be in London.
Yeah. Do you think that's is that one of your goals?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Are you brave enough to give a timescale on that at this point?
I'll say it won't be in 2016, but that's all I'll say.
Cool. No, I'm excited. So last time we spoke, you also went through the Discover Strength basic workout template, which included 4 exercises for the lower body and about 10 to 12 exercises in total. I appreciate that's just the initial template, and that does change based on performance and individual specialization. It was my understanding that research has shown that a big movement like a leg press, or perhaps a chest press or a pull down, covers all the bases. So why then do so many exercises if they don't provide any additional benefit? If my thinking is correct there.
That's true, but we also, there's literature to say that a single joint movement is just as valuable as a multiple joint movement. So we could just take the approach that we would just do single joint movements and skip the leg press altogether. So we thought we should have a variety of a focus on multiple joint movements, but also workouts where we do more single joint movements, because there seems to be very little difference between stimulating strength and hypertrophy. Now, would I say that if you've done a multiple joint movement, do you need to make sure that you do multiple single joint movements for that same muscle to be more well-rounded? I don't think that's the case. But I would argue that if you're doing just a leg press, a multiple joint leg movement for the hips, the quads, the hamstrings, I don't know how much stimulation you're getting for the anterior tibialis or for the gastrocnemius or for the soleus, even the adductor, the abductors, definitely the hip flexors. So I think that's where there's a real place for some isolation movements.
That's very interesting perspective.
And remember, that comes down to stimulating hypertrophy. What we found, and I tell James Fisher this all the time, this is fascinating, just fascinating, is when we've done a number of our research studies, the studies never include adductor and abductor or calf exercises. They include like leg press, leg extension, leg curl. And let me tell you, with the different protocols we've used, and this is like brutally hard training, negative only training and pre-exhaust training and breakdown training. I mean, we've looked at a lot of these different high intensity training techniques, and all of the training I think is incredibly intense, and it's all supervised. I mean, just brutally hard workouts. But what we found out is we haven't had as much lean muscle tissue growth with some of those studies. And the reason we suspect is that we're actually atrophying a lot of the muscle groups that the client had previously been training. If you train adductor very consistently and you train calf very consistently and maybe abductor, but I'm just going to say adductor for right now, which is a very large muscle group, if you stop training that for a 10 to 12 week period, I think you're going to have some atrophy that actually would lead to a reduction in your overall lean muscle tissue. So it's one of our beliefs that the more tissue that you can train, the greater overall increase in lean body mass you're going to have, which of course is important because we want to add lean muscle tissue. But to our clientele, it's really important because we want to improve resting metabolic rate. We want to improve acute responses in terms of metabolic rate. So we know that 3 days after the strength training workout, we're going to have a greater increase in resting metabolic rate if we do leg press and adductor and calf versus just doing leg press. The more tissue that we can stimulate, the greater acute and chronic response and metabolic rate that we're going to have. And I've never met a trainee who's not interested in that response. And so that's why we've erred on the side of being just a little bit more comprehensive and including single joint movements.
That is very interesting response on that. Okay, so I'm going to move on to some of the questions that people have submitted. You did a study recently. We separated people out into single set to failure, negative only, and one other condition. And this is a question asked by Scott Myslinski. Do you recall that study, and are you able to elaborate on the outcomes?
Yeah, of course. So it hasn't been published yet. It's been submitted for publication. We expect it to be published in the next month or so, next 2 months. But really, the outcomes really surprised us. Our hypothesis is that the negative-only group, the group that didn't do the concentric work, they just lowered a very heavy weight over a 10-second period. We hypothesized that group would make greater increases in both strength and in lean body mass measured by BOD-POD. That was what we all expected. Well, what we found out was that all three groups were similar essentially across all exercises. And the three groups were one group that just used a 2-second, 4-second cadence to momentary muscle failure, one group that used a 2-second, 10-second cadence, so a positive of 2 seconds, a negative or eccentric of 10 seconds, and then the eccentric only group where we had 2 trainers for every client, and the 2 trainers performed the concentric, and the client performed a 10-second eccentric with a very heavy weight, and that set was terminated, obviously not at concentric muscle failure, but at eccentric muscle failure. As soon as you couldn't control a 10-second eccentric, then we terminated the set. And the goal there was 8 repetitions. And so we thought that group would outperform the other 2 groups, and really the 3 groups were very, very similar.
Okay, so nothing statistically different between the 3.
Yeah,
No.
There was one exercise where there was a statistical significant difference in terms of strength, and it was actually to the just 1 set to momentary muscle failure at a 2-4 repetition duration, and I don't even remember what exercise that was. It was just a slight statistical significance, and I don't even recall what that was. So part of us, to be honest with you, Lawrence, part of us were sad by these results because we're all looking for, like, I don't want to say the holy grail, but we're looking for something that actually produces better results. And I'm telling you, because I witnessed all of the training, I mean, this is, I think, the largest scale negative-only training study that was ever conducted. I mean, we had a lot of subjects, we did a lot of workouts, a lot of weeks of training. I mean, everything is trained by 2 trainers on the negative-only, and we paid attention to every fathomable detail, and we didn't produce any better results. Now, does that mean that we've scrapped negative-only training from kind of our script of what we'll do? No, we absolutely still integrate it. We just can't say that it absolutely conclusively produces better results than anything else.
So this is a question from Mr. Fisher, James Fisher. What is your favorite manually applied resistance exercise and why?
So when we think about that, we like to think about the manual resistance exercise that we think outperforms any of the machines that are out there. So if a client were to be sitting on the best exercise machine that we think has ever been made, or the couple best exercise machines that have ever been made for a particular muscle group, or if we had that client do the manual resistance version of it, what would they actually prefer? If they said, I want to do one or the other for the duration of my training, which one would they actually prefer? And so the ones that stick out to us, number one is a manual resistance tricep. We literally don't buy tricep machines for any of our facilities because we've just found over the years that clients love manual resistance triceps. So that would be one of them. A manual resistance hip flexion exercise, because there's really no manufacturers that make a hip flexion exercise that I'm very familiar with. And we love to do that with one leg at a time, manual resistance hip flexion. So that would be one. We love a manual resistance posterior deltoid. I like that better than doing a rear deltoid or posterior deltoid on like a hammer strength machine or a Nautilus Nitro machine. Nautilus used to make a Nautilus next generation posterior deltoid machine, a Nautilus first generation. It was called rowing back, and that's just, again, a posterior deltoid machine. We've really liked manual resistance more than that. So I'm not giving you, James, one exercise that's my favorite, but those are 3 of our favorite manual resistance exercises. But Lawrence, honestly, we love a lot of manual resistance. We love manual resistance for the neck, and we have expensive neck machines also, but we love manual resistance for the neck. We love a variety of manual resistance abdominal exercises. We like manual resistance even for a pec fly we think is effective. A lot of manual resistance hamstring. I would say the one that we maybe use the most for the lower body is manual resistance hamstring. If occasionally as a client has an issue or they're having some knee discomfort on like the Medix leg curl, they can almost always do a manual resistance hamstring without any discomfort. So that's like a go-to for us. We're using that all the time.
Let's talk about your conference that's coming up soon. So the Resistance Exercise Conference. Can you just, I look at the video, it's very impressive, very great marketing actually. I was quite intrigued, and I wish I was in the US to attend. So what is it that people can expect? What is if you can elaborate perhaps on the agenda and what people will learn and that kind of thing, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely, Lawrence. This is our 6th year doing the conference. It's a real passion of ours. We just love to bring in what we think are the most interesting minds in resistance exercise from all different walks of the field from all around the country. And this year, we have 5 incredibly impressive keynote speakers. One of them is James Fisher, who we mentioned previously. My summary statement on James Fisher is that he's more responsible than anyone for contributing to the literature around strength and hypertrophy. I think he's more responsible for a meaningful contribution to that body of knowledge than any other researcher over the last 5 to 8 years. In addition to being incredibly knowledgeable about muscle strength, muscle hypertrophy, and what the literature says around those topics, he's also one of the best scientists I've ever interacted with. So it's one thing to really, truly know a lot about exercise and know a lot about strength training. It's another thing to have an incredibly high level of integrity as a scientist, and I really respect him as a scientist. And I also think that he's a great presenter. So James is just a phenomenal speaker. This will be the 4th year that we've had him present, and I'm telling you that I look forward to hearing his presentation just as much as anybody else. He's just a great speaker. So James Fisher is one of our keynotes. Our other keynote is Dr. James Steele, who's a colleague of James Fisher. They're not speaking together. They have totally different topics, different areas of research. And Dr. James Steele is going to talk about the cardiorespiratory and cardiovascular responses to resistance training and resistance exercise. So we're looking forward to that presentation. Then we have really probably the biggest name in the conference is Dr. Teresa Lee Ambrose. She's at the University of British Columbia in Canada, and she's, I think, the world's leading expert on how strength training or resistance exercise impacts cognitive function, the prevention of mild cognitive impairment, which is a precursor to dementia. Everything she publishes seems to be picked up by the New York Times. I think her area of research is incredibly interesting, and I think we're really just at the impetus for where that research is going to go. So she's going to fly in and talk about how strength training impacts cognitive function. And so those are three of our real researchers that are speaking. Our next keynote is a guy by the name of Mike Rayfelt. He's the head strength coach for basketball at University of Cincinnati, so big-time Division I basketball here in the U.S., and he's got a great background where he spent time in the NFL and college football and obviously high-level basketball. He's a guy that I know very, very well. We worked together in the late 90s and early 2000s, and he's had some tremendous experiences, and he's really going to talk from a strength coach's perspective about how do you prepare an athlete that's in a quote-unquote explosive sport, how do you prepare them for competition. And then our last keynote speaker is Mark Asanovich. He's a legendary NFL strength coach, was the strength coach for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for a number of years, Jacksonville Jaguars, and really Mark is more responsible than almost any other NFL strength coach that I can think of for influencing how other NFL strength coaches and college strength coaches run their programs and train athletes the way they do. So I think Mark is one of the best speakers as a strength coach that there is really in the world. He's a great teacher and a great educator. So those are our 5 keynotes. But Lawrence, what we're doing that's cool this year is each one of those individuals will give a 1-hour-long keynote. They're also going to give a 15-minute, what we're calling almost like a TED Talk. So they're taking a specific different topic for 15 minutes and just doing a deep dive on one small topic that maybe you don't want to hear for 60 minutes, but 15 minutes of it you just love to dive into. So they'll do 5 additional topics. Our director of operations at Discover Strength, Brandon Yonker, is going to do a TED Talk format, a 15-minute presentation on what we call the 5 pillars of a great training session. So as a personal trainer or strength coach, we want to really introduce what we think the 5 elements that really make great workouts. He's going to talk about that. And then I'm going to do a TED Talk around visionary leadership. So we think the whole conference should really be like 98% about resistance exercise. And then I usually do some type of topic around something leadership related. So as we work in the fitness industry, health club industry, personal training industry, or as a strength and conditioning coach, we can become a better leader, a better manager, because I think that still has its place. So in addition to that, we do a speaker roundtable where we get all those keynote speakers together and the whole audience gets a chance to ask questions. And then that panel of speakers will interact with each other as they answer those questions, which is always really exciting. We'll do about 7 different hands-on demonstrations of different exercise techniques. We do an early morning workout early in the morning on Saturday at one of our Discover Strength locations where we just ship all the attendees off to that. They just hop on the train. It's like a 5-minute train ride over to our Discover Strength location. They do a workout with our staff, and then we ship them back over and get into the conference for the day. So it's not just 60-minute presentation after 60-minute presentation. We have a lot of different vehicles for how we're going to kind of expose the attendees to information. We also have a great social on Friday night where all the speakers will be at, all the attendees will be at, so it's a chance to really connect and talk and enjoy some collegiality. So lunch is included. It's just a really fun weekend. Lawrence, when I think about the different things I have planned in my year, this weekend is so much fun because it's the epitome of a chance to learn, a chance to sharpen the saw, a chance to be inspired by your colleagues, a chance to network. I think everybody leaves there not only learning a lot, but also everyone is really very much inspired to go back to whatever their workplace is and just to do great work.
That was a strong pitch, Luke.
Well, good,
No,
good.
I honestly feel like that is like an event crafted for myself. Like I feel like I'm so jealous. Like I'd love to attend. It does sound awesome, especially the chap who's got a lot of experience in high level basketball and obviously
Yeah,
all the
absolutely.
resistance
You would
exercise.
fit right in. You would fit right in.
Oh man, yeah, I will be over at some point, and I tell you what I'm going to have to do. I'm going to have to like come to the US for a few months somehow. I'd have to try and figure out how that would happen, and actually just do like a round trip where I get to actually meet all of you guys, meet everyone who's been on the podcast, and and just have those interactions.
Well, we'll treat you like a king when you do that. I promise.
I appreciate it. Question for me personally. I've personally found that last year, this is me, I'm really opening up now, but last year I had a tremendous amount of motivation for Corporate Warrior and the podcast. And it was pretty, it was sustained throughout the entire year. And for some reason, coming into New Year, I had a lull in that motivation. And it would kind of be inconsistent. Like sometimes I do have a full-time job in sales, which is very demanding, and other responsibilities. And I found it challenging to kind of summon that same motivation, although I feel like it is certainly coming back to me much more. Have you experienced a similar thing in business yourself? And how is it, if you have, how is it you've been able to spring back? And do you have any, again, I'm making this question really long, but do you have any kind of daily habits or routines that you use to make sure that you sustain the motivation towards your business and I suppose your purpose?
Yeah, what a phenomenal question, Lawrence, because I think everything that you just said there, everyone has experienced that to varying degrees. And for me, I have a pretty succinct answer to it. Number one, you have to be able to connect intellectually your daily activities, whatever it is that you're doing, to your longer-term vision. So your longer-term vision for the life that you want to live and the longer-term vision for what you're trying to build in terms of business. And then when you always are operating with an understanding of what the longer-term vision is, and you've broken that down into smaller steps, so you understand this is where I want to be maybe 10 years from now, and so this is where I need to be 3 years from now, so this is where we need to be 1 year from now. So that means in order for me to be there 1 year from now, this is what I need to accomplish in the next 90 days, in the next quarter. And that forces me to stay on track for just what's in front of me. The next 90 days, what do I need to execute on? Because I know if I take care of the next 90 days, that's going to put me on track for my 1 year goal. And if I achieve that 1 year goal, if I set it correctly, it'll put me on track to achieve my 3 year goal. And if I achieve the 3 year goal, it'll put me on track to achieve that longer term 10-year vision. So that whole approach mentally is in sharp contrast to just wake up and just kind of work each day and keep grinding and keep rolling up your sleeves and keep hustling. And I love to hustle, but I understand that you can hustle for 5 years straight or 10 years straight, and you wake up and you look around and you say, geez, have I made much progress? Am I moving in the direction that I actually want to move in? And all too often the answer is no. I'm just hustling every day. I'm just working hard every day. So I think in order to maintain that motivation, you need to connect daily activities to what the longer term vision is. So that's number one. And number two, and maybe more powerful from a moment by moment actual motivation, is you have to surround yourself with sources of motivation, and you have to eliminate any energy sucking forces in your life, like eliminate the energy vampires, of course, in your life. And so for me to surround myself by sources of motivation is I'm a very, very intrinsically motivated person. It's so incredibly easy to get me excited and get me motivated about something. But as you alluded to, I will still have ebbs and flows and lulls in that motivation. So I know that I need to be around the right material in order for me to sustain and cultivate, always be cultivating that motivation. And I can translate that into an intrinsic motivation. So for me, it's reading the right things. I mean, I have to be reading the right books every single day. I have to do the right amount of reading every single day, make sure I'm surrounded by the right books every single day. But it's not just books, it's conferences and events and speakers. I just flew back from Taipei, Taiwan a couple of days ago, where I spoke at a conference in Taipei, and the other keynote speaker is actually from the UK, and he's a great consultant in the health club world. And we got together after the presentation and had coffee for a couple hours, and I was inspired by him and the things that he's studying and the things he's speaking on. And I left there, I mean, I gave a presentation, but I left there more motivated and more interested because I was influenced by another person that I come across with. And I love doing that. I'm going to fly out in a week here to Florida for 2 conferences back to back, and I'm going to go present at both conferences. But I'm more excited about going there and not just learning, but by cultivating my own personal motivation, by being around people that motivate me, that inspire me. And that goes both ways, Lawrence. It's not just people that motivate me, but it's seeing people that I don't want to be like. I don't want to fall into the trap that they've fallen into. How do I want to be different than what they're actually doing? So it's just surrounding yourself by experiences that move you, that inspire you, that motivate you, so that when things do ebb and flow, you've built this foundation where you're always going to be influenced by the right people, the right information, the right books, etc.
Luke, I'm conscious of time. How are you for time at this point?
Yeah, let me just look right now. I have an interview in about 18 minutes, so I can definitely go like another 12 minutes.
Okay, good stuff. Right, okay. So what I'm going to do is ask a lot of, for those listening, if you could submit your questions to the blog, because I know Mike, Paul, Michael, you guys, I know you answer tons of questions or ask tons of questions, but time's short. So please submit those to the blog and Luke will answer those or to the Facebook page. So I want to go on to some rapid fire questions I'm dying to ask you. If you could make one ask or request for those listening, what would that be? I guess in terms of health and fitness would be an easy way to answer that.
One ask or request?
Yes, correct.
So give me an example. Frame that for me.
So if, I'll rephrase. So what I mean is one thing that they could action in their life. So one tip or hint or tactic, and something that you feel is really critical that people should be doing.
Okay, so I would simply say this. If you're committed to doing high intensity strength training 1 to 2 times per week, make sure that you are cultivating your psychological, your mental fervor for that training experience. And I think the best way to do that is to train with somebody. Be trained by someone, have someone train you, have a training partner. So that would be my hack.
I like that. Okay. What morning routines do you have? What does the first 90 minutes of your day look like?
So the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is I read 3 things. I read a daily devotional, which takes me very little time. I read a page out of a book called The Daily Drucker. So it's a collection of Peter Drucker's work, and it's a great way to be exposed to his work, but not sit down and read a 300-page book in the moment. It's just one concept or one idea. So I start with the daily devotional, then I move to the Daily Drucker, and then right now for about a 300-day period, I'm reading kind of the sales classic. It's Og Mandino, The Greatest Salesman in the World, which I think that book has less to do with sales and more to do with just effectiveness as a human being. And so I read one scroll each day from there. So that's how the morning starts right there. And then I don't necessarily exercise in the morning. Every morning in terms of my exercise is different. When I'm going to strength train, I'm kind of almost chronically in marathon training. So sometimes that could take place early in the morning. Sometimes I start with clients at 6 in the morning, so the exercise takes place later in the day. So that's how the morning always starts.
I love that. I read The Effective Executive when I was in Mexico on holiday, and it blew my head off.
Absolutely,
Management theory is not easy.
Yep.
I've got to be honest, I much prefer how Ferris distilled it in 4-hour work week. But I'm going to look at that myself because I love that approach to business. And I do follow that in my own practice in terms of this podcast and also my day job. I've been able to be pretty effective very, very little time. What have you changed your mind about in the last year? Since we last spoke about health and fitness, what have you changed your mind about which you think would be of most interest to the listeners, if anything?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And maybe I don't have an interesting answer. I'm not sure if I think much of anything has changed. I think the only thing that I would say is that if you asked me exactly a year ago, I would say that negative-only training is definitely trumps any other form of training in terms of stimulating strength and hypertrophy. And based on the results of our study, I can no longer make that claim, and I no longer believe that. I still enjoy negative-only training as much as anything. I mean, I include it in my workouts, but I just wouldn't conclusively say that it produces better results.
No, I respect your objectivity there, and it's good to see. In the last 5 years, when have you felt the most successful?
I feel the most successful when I am spending time in a meeting, in a training session, or maybe on a trip or at a conference with my staff. So for me, my biggest passion in the work that we do is building a company that's filled with great people. And I think that you can distill building a great company down to if you can attract and retain great people, you will eventually build a great company. And I think it's tough to build a great company without great people. And I get the most enjoyment and the most sheer satisfaction from enjoying time. I feel the most successful when I'm spending time with my staff. So let me just give you two examples. One example was about a year and a half ago. We were at a conference in Florida, and I had 5 or 6 of my key staff with me. So some members of our leadership team or our executive team, some of our personal trainers that have been with us for a long, long time. We were in Florida with some of our best colleagues in the world. James Fisher was in Florida at the time, and then a number of our great health club colleagues from out the U.S., and we just had a phenomenal time talking about exercise, talking about business. I mean, literally, we were in the hot tub until 1 a.m. talking about sets and reps and movement speed and talking about great books and talking about how we like to learn and what we like to read and just spending time with staff is very meaningful to me. So that's number one. And number two is we took 15 trainers just 2 weeks ago to the Michigan State University Strength and Conditioning Clinic, and we had a great time not only learning at the clinic, but even a better time in the evening going to dinner and talking about training and talking about life. And that's when I feel the most satisfied and the most successful, is when I look around and get to spend time with like-minded individuals, people that are working together in our company to achieve a shared goal, to achieve a shared vision. To me, that's really what it's all about. And I guess one way you could describe that or restate that, re-articulate that, Lawrence, is I just enjoy the journey. And those two moments for me just crystallized like what the journey's all about. The journey's all about who you go on the journey with, not just where you end up and what you experience. It's who are you actually experiencing it with. And for me, I felt so fortunate to spend it with great staff.
What a final key question. What insight about training have you acquired that seems obvious to you, but might not be obvious to everybody else? And I guess I mean specifically, you can answer in two ways. One, in the high intensity training community, and in the wider mass community.
In the wide mass community is that you have to resistance train. And even if you think you're resistance training, you're probably not resistance training. I have a membership at one of the largest health club companies in the world, and I go there and I use a Stairmaster step mill, and I occasionally run on the treadmill there. And frankly, I go to their cafe and have a sandwich every now and then. And I look around, and literally when I look around, I think 95% of the people that are coming here, that are showing up and spending money and changing their clothes and going through the motions, are reaping almost no benefit from what they're actually doing, because they're not placing any tension on muscles. They're not actually fatiguing muscle whatsoever. They've engineered like the hard work out of their workouts. And I think that is so incredibly basic and so incredibly simple, but we've made massive strides in the wrong direction when it comes to exercise in general and resistance exercise for the masses in the last 10 years. So that's kind of number one. I think for people that operate in the realm of high-intensity training, I really want to make sure I answered this one appropriately. So, Lawrence, restate that. Was it one nugget or one thing that I believe that maybe other people don't believe. How did you word that?
Yeah, exactly. So what insight about training have you acquired that seems obvious to you but might not be obvious to everybody else?
So my insight would be that we don't actually know the best way to do it. And so to say that the way you're doing it is the absolute best way is just not correct. I think there's an umbrella of evidence-based exercise. There's this umbrella of evidence-based resistance exercise or high-intensity training that we should operate under, but we don't know the answers under that umbrella. We don't know sitting here right now, Lawrence, if 5 exercises produces the best results or if 20 exercises in a given workout produces the best results. And so we don't know if a 4-4 repetition duration or a 10-10 repetition duration. There's so many things that are unanswered. And so I guess my one insight is that operate under that umbrella, but don't feel constricted or handcuffed to one small application or one specific application of these general principles or the different evidence that really falls under or creates this umbrella. Just operate with freedom under the umbrella, because I think that leads to better training results. It leads to more exciting and engaging training experience. And if you're espousing that there's one specific way to do it under the umbrella, so much of that is theory and so much of that is opinion. It's just not based on science. And eventually some of the science will maybe give way to a little bit more direction, but right now it hasn't. So I would say my insight is there's more freedom to our training than many of my close colleagues would probably, I think, care to admit or they care to apply in their own training and the training of their clients.
What's the best way for people to contact you these days, Luke?
They can email me at luke@discoverstrength.com. And they can check out more information about, of course, our company at discoverstrength.com. Or, of course, they can check out more information about our conference. They can just go to resistanceexerciseconference.com.
Good stuff. And for all the listeners, for all of the show notes and resources for this one, go to corpwarrior.com. That redirects you to the homepage, and you'll be able to get access to all of that information there. And I'd also like to mention, and obviously I've mentioned this to you, Luke, I've put together a transcription ebook which contains the first 14 interviews I've done on this podcast. And the cool thing is they're not transcribed verbatim, which sounds odd, but when you read verbatim interviews, they sound shit. So what I've had commissioned is these podcasts to be transcribed in a way which makes them easy to read, but obviously it captures all of the relevant information, doesn't exclude anything. And obviously it's a great resource for people trying to burn fat, build muscle, build a business, improve productivity, improve vitality, etc., etc. So I will be putting a link to that ebook in the blog post, and the listeners can obviously click that link and go and consider or not whether they would like to purchase that. So yeah, I think, Luke, I really appreciate your time again. This has been a lot of fun, and I've learned a ton as always talking to you. But I think you've got to get off. You've got things to do. So,
Lawrence, thank you for your time. I enjoy listening to all your podcasts. My favorite thing to do on a long drive or when I'm on a long training run is to download one of your podcasts and listen to it. So keep them coming. You're doing great work, and I appreciate your contribution to the field of both high-intensity training and then management, business, productivity, all of it. So I really appreciate everything that you're putting out.
That is incredibly flattering. Thank you, Luke. And I will obviously be in touch when all this is ready to go. And we'll talk soon.
Lawrence, thank you so much.
Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
This podcast is brought to you by hituni.com. That's hituni.com. HitUni is an e-learning course provider specializing in high-intensity training for personal trainers and for people looking to learn how to apply the principles of HIT to their own training for best results. It comes highly recommended by Body by Science author Dr. Doug McGuff, Discover Strength CEO Luke Carlson, MedX Precision Fitness owner Blair Wilson, HIT expert Drew Bay, and the founder of Living La Vida Low Carb, Jimmy Moore. It was founded by author and high-intensity training master personal trainer Simon Shawcross. Simon has 15 years experience and has supervised over 15,000 workouts. Due to a combination of demand and a lack of quality in certification programs in the fields of high-intensity training, Simon and his team spent the last 3 years developing top-quality courses that will educate fitness professionals and participants to enable them to train individuals and themselves in the safest manner and produce best results. HIT Uni has been put together using knowledge from the very best minds in the field of exercise, including Skylar Tanner, James Steele, Dr. Doug McGuff, Drew Bay, John Little, Mike Mensa, Arthur Jones, Dr. Ellington Darden, and many more. The courses are delivered online through the website, where you can learn via a variety of multimedia materials at your own pace and convenience. The online video presentations are engaging and make learning fun. Online support and a discussion forum are provided to resolve any sticking points and enable you to share ideas and ask for help. Depending on whether you want to become a personal trainer, are already a personal trainer who wants to upskill, or if you're a keen HIT participant that is eager to learn more about how you can apply HIT to your own workouts for maximum benefit, there are several great value courses to choose from. I am personally partway through the PT course and I'm really enjoying it. I primarily wanted to do the course to learn more about how to apply HIT to my own training for better results. The courses are really easy to follow and each section is organised into bite-sized chunks that give you a real sense of achievement after you complete each one. To get your exclusive Corporate Warrior 10% discount on any course you purchase, simply head on over to hituni.com, that's hituni.com, and enter the coupon code CW10, that's CW and the number 10. So again, head on over to hituni.com, hituni.com, pick your course and enter the coupon code CW10. Thanks very much for your support.